quite a lot. And Erlang or Elixir? Okay, few. So brief introduction to give a bit about context, how I came about Phoenix and Elixir. So my name is Darko Fabijan. You can find me on Twitter. During university times, I used to do hardware and embedded software, so C++, some assembly. I spent last 6 years doing Ruby and Rails. And recently, I did some Go and Erlang and Elixir. And I have been working on SAM for CI since 2011. And it's hosted continuous and integration service. And as you can imagine, it's quite a complex system in the background that runs on many servers, and there are many supporting services. And all that needs to run to give a great user experience. And some of the issues that we were facing got me into reading about distributed systems, fault tolerance, and reliability. And when you enter that arena, generally, there are two ways that you can go. One are theoretical books, scientific papers, algorithms, and so on, which is all great, but I, as a practitioner, wanted something that I can use tomorrow and that I can read about some real-world experiences. And no matter which way you go in that practical direction, you pretty much always end up on Erlang. So I started reading about Erlang, and it's quite interesting as a language, but even more as a virtual machine. So if you come from object-oriented background, you're pretty much familiar with the concept that you have objects, and they communicate by sending messages. And in Erlang, you don't have objects, but you have processes, which also communicate by sending messages. But the difference is that those processes actually can run concurrently. And if you have enough CPU cores or CPUs, they can also potentially run in parallel. And that's a huge advantage. As Erlang is concurrent programming languages, there are primitives to do all that concurrency. And another language which just a few weeks ago hit version 1.0 is Elixir. It runs on top of Erlang VM in the same way as Clojure runs on top of JVM. And it's a really modern, dynamic language with metaprogramming features. And apart from those language features that are all great, the whole tooling around is really modern and great. The stand library is really built for the internet, and you can just learn it really easily. Sorry. There are also great tools for managing dependency, running tests, and so on. And there is a web framework called Phoenix, which recently hit 0.5 version, which is inspired by Rails. So all of you Ruby guys will probably find it really familiar. But since the nature of Elixir is so much different than Ruby, although syntax is very much inspired by Ruby, the framework is not exactly, like say, the copy of the Rails, but introduces many new concepts, which it can. As you all know, in Ruby world, using a thread and Ruby in the same sentence is not a happy combination, and it's quite different in Elixir world. So I'm going to jump to a demo, and that's something that you wouldn't usually want to do. What we are going to create is a simple chat application. It's a simple one-page application. Everybody can join, exchange messages. And I'm going to start by copy-pasting few really basic lines of code just to save some time. So I have Phoenix cloned on my machine. And I'm going to generate a fresh new Phoenix application. There is a really nice generator built in. Mix is a tool which comes from Elixir. So it's mix Phoenix new. Let's call app PolyConf and place it in work. PolyConf. Okay, so generate a new application. Oh. Okay. So are we going to install dependencies? We do that with mix.deps.get. Okay. And now we are going just to start our application, and it's also going to compile everything. So Elixir is a compiled language, but there is a built-in automatic compiler in the framework, so it recompiles every time reload. I will have to restart the server a few times when I introduce some new files, but I guess in future that will also work on auto reload. So okay, let's check the browser. So okay, so this is the landing page of framework, some just basic information. And let's walk a bit through a directory structure. Rails people will find it familiar. So of interest for us, there are mix.exs. It's something like gem files that specify dependencies, but also configures a few other things. Mix.log is same as gamlog file. Lib, it's just one file to start up our Phoenix application. Private, so pretty much the static files, something like a public folder in Rails, and most of the things live in a web directory. So we have channels here, which we will introduce shortly. There are controllers, the same way as in Rails. Models, router, and templates and views are separated in Phoenix, and it's actually pretty nice separation. I find it nicer than in Rails. Templates are just, of course, template files, and view is a layer which you can use to override, for example, your render functions, introduce some view helpers, and so on. So, and let's follow one request that we make in the browser through the framework. Oh. Let's start with router. So in Phoenix you have macros, and in Elixir you have macros, and they're really powerful. So you can create DSLs which can make your libraries much nicer. Fields like Rails routes file, there are scope, which are essentially namespaces. There are also something called pipes. You can think of that maybe like before filters in Ruby, but on a different level. And just a simple DSL for specifying routes. So from there we go to page controller. And also here you can actually feel the syntax of Elixir. So it's similar to Ruby. Pretty much from here, a plug is a library which handles a lot of like web things around requests that you need. And here we just render a template. So the next place to go is that index template. And there is a language which is EX. It's really, really similar to ERB that you have in Ruby. Okay, and let's just change this page. Okay, really browser. Okay, so now I'm going to copy-paste a few lines of code, but they're really simple to save some time. Just a view for our application. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, we will see here our chat messages. We can enter username and our message here. Apart from that, for this view layer, we will need the jQuery, which I'm going to include now, and we will also use Phoenix.js, which is a JavaScript part of Phoenix framework, which enables that bidirectional communication. We are going to add it to the layout. Okay, I need to move jQuery file. Okay. Let's see what we have now. Okay. And we need a JavaScript part, which will just listen to the submit of this form and trigger sending of the message. It's really simple jQuery code. Okay, so we just grab few elements here, bind on the submit of the form, and we're going to just pop an alert. Okay, this is where the fun part starts.
Uneducated quotes. They are smart quotes, not straight quotes.
Ah, okay. Oh yeah, copy pasting. Yeah, thank you. I would never found it. Okay. Okay, it works. Thanks again. So, so we have a boilerplate to start working on. So the first thing that we are going to do is define something called channel in Phoenix. We're going to define that in our router. So channel is pretty much a bidirectional connection that is persisted between the browser and your server. So let's start with that. So we need to include a socket layer of router, and we need to mount it to a path. And there is a DSL for channel. And the name of our channel will be room. And we are going to bind it to a channel. Let's call it a room channel. And let's create that file with libs and web channel. And define the channel here. So it's just a module. And the first thing that we are going to do is define the join function. So every channel must have a join function where the browser will connect with the server. And in that join function, we can also do some authentication and decide to accept the connection from user or reject it. So it accepts a socket, accepts a topic. So it's like topic is something like let's say rooms that you have in chat. It can also define different events. So let's call this topic PolyConf. We can also accept some data that we don't need in this case. And to allow user to connect, we have to return OK socket. And let's add some debugging here. And now I will need probably to restart our server. And define a JavaScript part. So here, we will also need to define a socket. And we want to join on this socket, so we'll just call join function, specifies a channel, specifies a topic. It can send some data and a callback. So let's see if it's working. Okay, we have connected here. And in our server log, we should also see our debug message. So it's here. Someone joined. So this is the first part. In the second part, we want to do something useful, and that is to send the message back to the server. So we do this, we don't need this alert anymore. But what we want to do is send a message on this channel. There's a really simple API. Sorry. We send an event. Let's call it a new message. And send some data. And data is username. Okay, and now we want to accept that event in our channel. So since Elixir is a functional programming language, we always have to pass this socket around. And here we accept socket. We defined an event that we want to receive here, and data, and return socket. And of course, some debugging code. So let's see. So this is the part where I still have to reload the server. Okay, we have connected. Now let's try to send a message. Sorry? Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, clear. Sorry, let's see, how many minutes do I have? Okay, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, we sent a message to the server. Okay, so we need to broadcast that message to all the users which had joined our chat room. And it's really easy. We just need to call a broadcast function in our event. And here we can actually broadcast any message, but in our case, just to broadcast new message back to users is fine. So on socket, we broadcast new message event and just hit the same data back. Okay, and we need to accept that message on our front side. So on channel, we will accept event new message. And let's do something ugly. Let's append it to our chat box. Okay, that should be it. Okay, so we got the message back from the server. I wanted actually to allow you to connect also and forward my port 4000, but for some reason it cannot work on this wireless network. So let me just simulate that. Let's open Chrome. Go to localhost. Okay, we have joined. John says, yo. And so it works. Okay, so why I find this really interesting is that I feel that this framework, with combination with this language, can really spawn a new generation of web frameworks for web development. It somehow, for me, brings all the good stuff from Node.js and also from Rails. So you have that in one framework, in one language. As you can see, at least for me, the language is really readable and nice. And I don't want to go into too much detail about Erlang VM. There will be another talk about that, but it's a really powerful VM, can run on many servers at the same time, which are interconnected, so you can easily make clusters and a lot of other fancy distributed system programming stuff. So I think we have 5 more minutes. Are there any questions? Okay, one down here. Hi.
Hi. Are you actually using it in production for something? You're using it in your company? Because I just checked briefly that you're doing some kind of deployment and...
Yeah. That's the part I wanted to say, but actually forget. So no, we are not using Erlang or Elixir in production. Elixir hit 1.0 just like a month ago. Many great things that we have learned from studying Erlang, we applied in our production systems. But our production systems still run mostly in Ruby, and we have some parts written in Go. So it works for us. We plan to investigate this approach more in the further. So that's pretty much it regarding our stack. So no production experience, and I also not sure how many people can say that they have production experience with Elixir and Phoenix. But there is a really nice community forming around this. A lot of people from Rails were jumping in, so I think it really looks promising. Just yesterday, a book, Programming in Elixir, was published by a pragmatic programmer, written by Dave Thomas. So it's definitely something you can check out. Yeah.
Thanks. So I could just ask if you have any ideas, like what kind of use cases in your company you would like to cover with this kind of technology?
Well, there are actually 2 really different use cases. As I mentioned, running distributed systems brings a lot of challenges regarding all that network communication and reliability. So that's where the Erlang VM with its features built in 80s come in. So that is something really nice. And the other part is just this real-time browser server communication, because we have to stream a lot of things into the browser, like the logs and a lot of events. So there are 2 use cases. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One word, benchmarks?
Well, the author of Phoenix Framework actually did some benchmarks. But as you know, with benchmarks, they are always synthetic to some step and got a lot of heat on the internet. Well, generally it's compiled language, compiles to the bytecode, same as Erlang, so it should be I don't know, order of magnitude probably faster than Ruby. So yeah, that's the only thing that I can say. But the benchmarks were really also very promising. My guess is this takes more attention. It will be probably benchmark compared to Node.js, maybe Go. So yeah, that's all I can say.
Do you think that Elixir could potentially completely replace Rails for most of the most common use cases, or do you see any classes or problems where you think the more traditional architecture would be a better fit, or do you think Elixir / Erlang could replace a lot of that?
Yeah, I have a feeling that it can. Elixir is generally a much smaller language than Ruby is. It's also much nicer. There are some areas in which it might not be as easy to work, but that's just my guess. For example, what all the things you can do in a view in Rails part, because at the moment it's decision that Phoenix does not include ORM. There is great library called EctoDB, actor, which is actually that mapping. But I don't have that much experience in functional programming, so with macros it could be possible, but as a functional language you will always have to maybe write a bit more code than it Rails, but it's really close. I haven't seen anything closer.
So I might have missed something, but is there a way to check if the front-end code is matching the API in the backend side?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is there a way to somehow verify if the front-end code that is communicating with backend is actually matching the API? That it doesn't use functions that are not there or this kind of stuff?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I don't, if that exists in other frameworks. Sounds like maybe a difficult thing to do. I don't know. I really don't know.